Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
It all started with a letter. Not the kind of letter you're excited to get, like a birthday card or a check from your grandma. No, this was one of those official-looking envelopes with the HOA logo stamped in the corner. You know the kind, thick paper, crisp font, and always bad news. I tore it open, and there it was. A new rule banning all doorbell cameras in our townhome community. I read it twice, just to make sure I wasn't missing something. But no, it was clear as day. No more Ring cameras, no Nest doorbells, nothing that could be attached to the exterior of our homes. The reason, apparently, it was to protect the historical integrity of the brick and building structures. I laughed out loud. Historical integrity? This wasn't some 18th century colonial village. Sure, the neighborhood was old, but it wasn't exactly a national landmark. And besides, my townhome wasn't even one of the original buildings. It had been built in the 1980s, for crying out loud. I stormed over to my neighbor, Jenna, who was already outside holding her own copy of the letter. Her face was red, and she looked like she was about to spit fire. "Can you believe this?" she said, waving the paper in the air. "They're banning doorbell cameras? What's next? Banning security systems altogether?" "I know," I said, shaking my head. "It's ridiculous. Who even came up with this?" Jenna rolled her eyes. "Guess." I didn't have to. We both knew. It was Officer Mike, the cop who lived 3 doors down and had somehow managed to get himself elected to the HOA board last year. He'd been pushing for more community safety measures, which apparently now meant stripping us of our ability to monitor our own front doors. "He's been on this power trip ever since he joined the board," Jenna said. "First it was the parking rules, then the garbage cans, and now this. What does he think he's doing, running a police state?" I nodded, but my mind was already racing. I had a Ring camera on my front door, and I wasn't about to take it down without a fight. I'd bought it after a string of break-ins in the area, and it had given me peace of mind ever since. Plus, it had caught the delivery guy stealing my Amazon package last month. Without that footage, I never would have gotten my money back. "They said we can apply for a variance," I told Jenna. "Maybe we can get an exception," she snorted. "Yeah, right. You know they'll deny it, they always do." Still, I wasn't ready to give up. I filled out the variance application that same day, requesting permission to attach my Ring camera to my storm door. It wasn't even part of the historical structure. It was just a plain old storm door I'd installed myself. Surely they couldn't have a problem with that. A week later, I got my answer. Denied. I couldn't believe it. I called the HOA office, demanding an explanation. The woman on the phone sounded bored, like she'd had this conversation a dozen times already. "The board has determined that any attachment to the exterior of the home, including storm doors, is a violation of the historical preservation guidelines," she said. "But it's my storm door," I protested. "It's not even part of the original building." "I'm sorry, but the decision is final," she said, not sounding sorry at all. I hung up, fuming. Jenna was right. They were never going to approve anything. The next day, I went to the HOA meeting. It was held in the community clubhouse, a small, stuffy room that always smelled like old coffee and desperation. Officer Mike was there, sitting at the head of the table with the rest of the board members. He had that smug look on his face, like he knew we were all there to complain but didn't care. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and held up my denial letter. "Can someone explain to me why I can't have a doorbell camera on my storm door? It's not attached to the brick, it's not part of the historical structure, and it's my property. What's the real reason behind this rule?" Officer Mike leaned forward, his hands folded neatly on the table. "As we've stated, the rule is in place to protect the historical integrity of our community. We have a responsibility to preserve the character of this neighborhood for future generations." "Future generations," I shot back. "What about the safety of the current generation? We've had break-ins, vandalism, and thefts. Don't we have a right to protect our homes?" He didn't even blink. "There are other ways to ensure safety without compromising the aesthetics of the community. We encourage residents to explore alternative security measures that comply with the guidelines." "Alternative measures," I repeated. "Like what? A guard dog? A moat? What exactly do you suggest?" The room erupted in laughter, but Officer Mike didn't crack a smile. "This isn't a joking matter," he said sternly. "The rule is in place, and it will be enforced. Any cameras found in violation will need to be removed immediately." I sat down, my face burning. Jenna gave me a sympathetic look, but there wasn't much else to say. The board had made up their minds, and they weren't going to budge. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the neighborhood grew. Some people took their cameras down, not wanting to risk a fine. Others, like me, left theirs up, hoping the HOA would back down if enough of us refused to comply. Then the notices started coming, official warnings threatening fines and even legal action if the cameras weren't removed. Jenna got one, and so did I. "What are we supposed to do now?" she asked me one evening, as we stood in her driveway staring at the notice in her hand. "I can't afford a fine, but I don't feel safe without my camera." "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm not taking mine down. They can fine me all they want. I'm not giving up my security because of some ridiculous rule," Jenna sighed. "I just wish there was a way to fight back. They're not even following their own rules. Did you see the new sign they put up at the entrance? It's huge, and it's attached to the brick. But apparently that's okay because it's community approved." I rolled my eyes. "Of course it is. Rules for thee, but not for me." The breaking point came a few nights later. I was woken up by the sound of glass breaking. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window, my heart pounding. Outside I saw two figures running down the street, their faces covered by hoods. One of them was carrying a backpack that looked suspiciously full. I grabbed my phone and checked my Ring app, but the camera hadn't picked up anything. The angle was off now that I'd moved it to comply with the HOA's rules. I cursed under my breath and called the police. When they arrived, they took my statement and asked if I had any footage of the suspects. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. "I used to have a camera that would have caught them, but the HOA made me take it down." The officer nodded sympathetically. "We've been getting a lot of calls from this neighborhood lately. Seems like the crime rate's gone up since the camera ban." No kidding, I thought. But what could I do? The HOA wasn't going to change their minds, and I wasn't going to risk a fine by putting my camera back up. The next morning the neighborhood was buzzing. Someone's car had been vandalized, and another home had been broken into. Everyone was on edge, and the anger toward the HOA was palpable. Jenna came over, her face pale. "Did you hear about the break-in on Maple Street?" she asked. "They stole a bunch of electronics and jewelry. The family didn't have a camera because of the ban." I clenched my fists. "This is insane. We're sitting ducks and the HOA doesn't care. We have to do something," Jenna said. "We can't just let them get away with this." "Like what?" I asked. "They're not going to listen to us." Jenna hesitated, then leaned in closer. "What if we all band together? Everyone who still has a camera, we keep them up. If enough of us refuse to comply, maybe they'll have to back down." I considered it. It was risky, but what other choice did we have? "It's worth a shot," I said. "But we need to be careful. If they start fining people, it could get ugly." Jenna nodded. "I'll talk to the others. We'll figure something out." As she walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The HOA had drawn a line in the sand, and we were standing on the wrong side of it. But I wasn't ready to back down, not yet. The battle lines were drawn and the war was just beginning. The tension in the neighborhood had reached a boiling point, but no one expected how it would all come crashing down. A few residents, fed up with the HOA's draconian rules and the recent spike in crime, had taken matters into their own hands. They'd installed tiny, nearly invisible security cameras. Cameras so small and discreet that even Officer Mike, with his eagle-eyed scrutiny, hadn't noticed them. These cameras weren't attached to doors or walls. They were hidden in flower pots, tucked under eaves, and even disguised as outdoor decorations. They were our secret weapons, and they were about to change everything. One night the cameras caught something no one could have predicted. Footage from a neighbor's hidden camera showed a figure in a hoodie sneaking up to a townhome, picking the lock and slipping inside. But when the figure emerged, the hood slipped back just enough to reveal a face we all knew too well, Officer Mike. The same man who had pushed for the camera ban, who had lectured us about historical integrity, was the one breaking into homes. And he wasn't alone. Over the next few nights more footage surfaced, showing Mike coordinating with a small group of accomplices, directing them to specific homes and even carrying stolen items himself. The evidence was undeniable. The neighbors who had captured the footage immediately took it to the police, who were stunned. Mike, the cop who had been so vocal about community safety, was the ringleader of the crime spree that had been terrorizing us. When the police confronted him, he was caught completely off guard. "This is ridiculous," Mike shouted as they cuffed him. "Those cameras are banned. This footage has to be fake. There's no way they could have gotten this." One of the officers, a no-nonsense detective who had been investigating the break-ins, held up a printout of the footage. "Looks pretty real to me, Mike. And we've got multiple angles. You're done." As they led him away, the neighborhood erupted into chaos. Some people cheered, others cried, and a few just stood there in stunned silence. Jenna and I watched from my porch as the scene unfolded. "I can't believe it," Jenna said, shaking her head. All this time he was the one behind it. He banned the cameras so he could keep doing this without getting caught. Karma's a funny thing, I said, though I didn't feel much like laughing. It was satisfying to see him get what he deserved, but it didn't erase the fear and frustration we'd all been living with for months. The fallout was swift. Mike was suspended from the police force and charged with multiple counts of burglary, conspiracy, and misconduct. The HOA board, now under intense scrutiny, held an emergency meeting to address the situation. They tried to spin it, claiming they had no idea about Mike's actions and that the camera ban had been well-intentioned. But no one was buying it. At the meeting, I stood up and looked each board member in the eye. "This isn't just about Mike," I said. "This is about the fact that you ignored us when we told you this rule was putting us in danger. You didn't listen, and now look what happened. We need to change things, starting with this ridiculous ban." The room erupted in applause, and even some of the board members looked ashamed. They promised to review the policy, but for many of us it was too little, too late. The trust was broken, and it wasn't going to be easy to rebuild. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood slowly began to heal. People started putting their cameras back up, some openly, others still hidden just in case. The crime spree stopped, and for the first time in months I felt like I could breathe again. But the scars were still there, a reminder of how close we'd come to losing everything. As for Mike, his trial was set to begin in a few months. The footage from those tiny cameras would be the key evidence against him, and there was no way he could talk his way out of it. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served. This has actually happened before in my state back in like the 70s or so. People used to call the local police station to tell them they're going on vacation to get a cop to drive by their place occasionally. This department had a burglary ring operation, and they would rob those families when they were on. The FBI got involved and made a bunch of arrests. Start by saying if there is any theft, violence, or anything else that camera footage would have assisted with, then you will sue him personally and take his house if you have to. I can't believe the HOA thought banning cameras was a good idea. What kind of logic is that? Let's make it harder for people to protect their homes because bricks matter more than safety. And then it turns out the cop on the board was the criminal mastermind. That's some twisted irony. HOAs need to stop pretending they know what's best for everyone and start listening to the people who actually live there.
If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day.
Welp finally got a notice from the HOA for smoking on my property. They've been watching on the cameras they installed around the neighborhood, and I've actually been smoking weed on my own damn porch because I can't smoke inside. I remember exactly when it happened. One of the HOA board members, Greg, self-appointed neighborhood watchdog, walked past pretending to be out for a casual evening stroll. He slowed down in front of my house, giving me that fake, authoritative glare like I was committing some serious crime. I didn't think much of it at the time because I wasn't bothering anybody, just sitting in my chair enjoying my own damn space. Then a few days later, boom, letter in the mailbox. A thick envelope with the HOA's name stamped on it like some official government notice. I already knew it was bad news before I opened it. You have violated the community guidelines regarding controlled substances. Failure to comply will result in fines or further action. Oh, of course. There was the usual nonsense about the rules, the bylaws, the agreement, blah blah blah. The paper might as well have read, "I fucking hate this HOA, and so does every other homeowner who lives here. The board members act like they're running a damn dictatorship, marching around at every meeting trying to scare people. And for what? It's a suburban neighborhood, not some top-secret government facility. Ask anyone who lives here. It's a prison with a mortgage. They've always been on a power trip, but this is a whole new level of control. I've seen people get harassed for the stupidest reasons. One guy got a violation because his trash can was visible before pickup. A woman down the street got fined because her flower pots weren't in approved colors. It's like they're making up rules just to keep themselves entertained. And the best part, some of these board members have been kicked off before because they got too carried away. Apparently they've even been sued a few times, but I guess that hasn't slowed them down. But here's what really pisses me off. I've been living here for years, and suddenly smoking outside is an issue. Where was all this concern before? I've sat on my porch plenty of times minding my own business, and nobody's ever said a damn thing. But now, because some nosy HOA board member got bored and decided to flex his little bit of power, I'm a problem. And for the people who are probably sitting there thinking, well, I don't like smokers or it's bothering someone, please get a grip. I make sure I'm not around anyone when I smoke, especially kids. I'm not some inconsiderate asshole blowing smoke into people's faces. I sit in my chair on my porch in the evening when barely anyone is outside. The only person who could possibly be affected by it is me. I went straight to the HOA office with the letter in hand. The moment I walked in, the property manager gave me that fake customer service smile. How can I help you? You can start by explaining this, I said, slapping the notice on the counter. She picked it up, glanced at it, then gave me a tired look. Oh, that's a standard violation notice. Standard, I scoffed. For what? Smoking outside on my own damn porch? The HOA bylaws prohibit controlled substances on the premises, she recited like she was reading from a script. Marijuana is included in that policy. I crossed my arms. That's funny because I've been doing it for a while and nobody's ever said a word. So why now? She hesitated, then lowered her voice. Someone reported it. Oh, so now we've got snitches. Fantastic. Who? I asked. She shook her head. We can't disclose that information. Of course they couldn't. Typical. I let out a sharp breath, trying to keep my temper in check. Let me get this straight. I can't smoke inside. I can't smoke outside. So what am I supposed to do? Hover over the sidewalk? She shifted in her seat. You can smoke off the HOA property. I laughed, shaking my head. Off the property? You want me to take a walk down the street like some teenager sneaking a cigarette? Do you even hear how ridiculous that sounds? She didn't say anything, just sat there, looking like she wished she were anywhere else. I grabbed the notice off the counter and held it up. This is bullshit, and you know it. You guys just want control over every little thing, and I'm sick of it. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. She knew I was right. Everyone in this neighborhood knew the HOA was a joke, but nobody could do a dumb thing about it. I stormed out of the office and went straight to my neighbor's place. James had been living here even longer than I had, and if there was one person who knew about the constant power plays around here, it was him. Dude, they hit you too? He asked the second he opened the door. I held up the notice. For smoking outside. James whistled low. Wow, they're really reaching now. You're telling me. I leaned against his doorframe. You ever get one of these? He laughed. Nah, but they did try to fine me for excessive noise when I had a friend over. We were literally just watching TV. I think they just throw these violations out randomly to remind people they're in charge. I ran a hand down my face. I can't with these people, James smirked. You know Karen in 3B, she got written up because her dog was too loud, at 2 in the afternoon. I let out a sharp laugh. Unreal. We stood there for a moment, just shaking our heads. This HOA is a joke, I muttered. Yep, James agreed. But they've got us locked in for the mortgage. I crumpled the notice in my hand. They can't stop me from smoking. I'll just be more discreet about it, James nodded. Just be careful. They're watching everything now. And that was the worst part. It wasn't just about smoking. It was about control. It was about knowing that they could watch us, listen to us, dictate every little part of our lives. I looked up at the camera mounted on the light pole, the red blinking light taunting me. Fine. If they wanted to play this game, so be it. I wasn't going down without a fight. When this happens, people like to read word by word the 100 pages of rules book, start stalking their neighbors like they do to you, and report them for the smallest violation. Feels justified. I got a city notice in an old neighborhood I used to live in that code enforcement saw our trash cans from the street poking out slightly from the side of the house, and that if it happened again, I would be charged with a misdemeanor crime. Don't live there anymore. Low-income housing apartment complex manager got shot 8 times by a retired veteran she was going to kick out. She had recently taken over the retirement community, and apparently they weren't as keen on her controlling ways as her previous place. She would stand outside of people's apartments and listen for noise after 10, and put a notice on your door. She creeped around and yelled at people like they were her kids. Her husband, before he died, wouldn't allow the children to play on the grass. When the news broke about her being shot, the consensus was, it's about time.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.